Welcome to Buying Local. I am Mike Nelson, your host, here with a guest today. Talk about some new happenings in the local markets. There seems to be some confusion, some controversy, and it seems like we're just trying to all get to the bottom of what's going on. Very easy these days on the internet to find all sorts of information about pretty much any subject. So sometimes hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, as they say, right, is the best way to do that. So I'm here today with Ray Apy from Saratoga Biochar Solutions. Ray, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, we've talked about this. Obviously our team here at Spa City has done some work with you guys. We helped you build a website. We've done a little video production, and really, there's just so much information out there. And so I know even having a relationship with you, am just a little confused about a lot of the things that I keep seeing, whether it's on Facebook or, and countless news articles that we've been seeing come through local publications. And I think there might have even been something on the news, television news. And so, and none of it all seems to kind of line up with each other. And so again, I'm confused. and I know that there's a lot of people out there in the local communities are confused as well. You have a kind of a Q&A session coming up, I believe, on Monday the 19th. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So to kind of help, I think, I don't know what the word is, to kind of clarify, I guess, maybe to try to, bring a little light to the subject with all the confusion out there. And we're hoping to kind of talk about some of that stuff today as well. So maybe, before we get started, for anybody that's not aware of what the project is, maybe just kind of give us a rundown about, who you are and what Saratoga Biochar is trying to do.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. So just backing up one step, the meeting that you referenced that's coming up on Monday night, that's a public participation informational meeting, and the intent is to provide information for not only Moreau, the town in which the project would be located, but for the surrounding communities so that people can understand what we've proposed to do, where we are in the process, specifically where we are in the New York State DEC permitting process. Give them a chance to offer comments, ask questions, give us a chance to respond. It'll be a 2-hour virtual meeting, and we're hoping it's productive. So That's that. A little bit of background on me. I've worked in the upstate New York area my entire professional career. I previously ran a technology company called Anise & Associates, which I sold in 2017. And after that, went back to my roots, which is in environmental science. That's what I was educated in undergrad and graduate school, and partnered up with a couple of guys who had a shared interest in taking a valuable waste product and cleaning it and converting it into a valuable fertilizer product. And so we created a company called Northeastern Biochar Solutions, which has a subsidiary company, Saratoga Biochar, which is our first project company. And we proceeded to file a site plan application in the summer of 2021 with the town of Moreau to site our first facility in their industrial park. The reception initially was positive. The review process took 13 months formally, about 16 months, including some pre-application work. And we received a site plan approval in August of this year to site that project in the Moreau Industrial Park. That approval had 16 fairly stringent conditions related to human health, environmental safety, and nuisance, relative to the potential for odors or noise. So the town did a really nice job, I think, in reviewing the project in detail, putting forth conditions with their approval which protect their community. So that's where we are now. We've completed that step. We're in the middle of the DEC permitting step, and public participation is part of that process, and that's what's happening now.
Okay. All right. And so, again, there's a lot of information out there, and I don't know how many articles I think I've read at this point. I know that, we've written a few as well. And I'm just trying to understand, where is all the confusion come from? Is there I don't want to say a source, but there's just so much information on the internet. I know at one point in time there was a comparison to the situation that happened up in Maine with, there was I think, I'm not even sure of the situation. It was there's spreading sewage on fields, and you know what I'm talking about?
I could tell you exactly what happened in Maine. In summary, in Maine, there was an organic dairy farm that was receiving biosolids from a local regional sewage treatment plant. That those biosolids contained elevated levels of PFAS compounds. And the reason that they did is because within that watershed was a manufacturing company that was using extremely high levels of PFAS in products that were actually used for human food consumption. So plates and cups and things like that.
That's great.
Yeah, that was the source. And so they were using so much, they were actually releasing quite a lot of it in their wastewater, which went to the wastewater treatment plant, which ended up in the biosolids, which were then taken out and spread on cropland. So that created elevated levels of PFAS in the grass that the cows ate, and then in the cows. So that's a terrible outcome, and that shouldn't happen. That's one of the many reasons why we're opposed to the continued practice of using biosolids directly as a fertilizer without further treatment. So currently in 44 out of the 50 states, it's legal to use biosolids as a fertilizer. Those biosolids are treated at the wastewater treatment plant to grade the biosolids. I won't get into the details of how that works unless you want to. But additionally, biosolids are then typically composted, lime is added, and they're basically allowed to rot long enough so that the pathogens work their way out of through the natural decomposition process. And then they're considered, quote unquote, Class A biosolids. And then they're used for agricultural fertilizer. So that's what happened in Maine.
So, and I know that I read it somewhere, but there continues to be a parallel drawn between what happened in Maine and what you're trying to accomplish here. Can help me understand, because again, I'm just a podcast host, right? So like, what's the difference between what they did and what you're doing?
Yeah, it's interesting that people are trying to draw a parallel because there is none. What occurred in Maine and situations similar to that are the primary reason why we've developed this technology to take these biosolids materials, add a tremendous additional treatment step to decontaminate them from the kind of materials that cause problems in Maine, PFAS particularly, as well as other volatile organic compounds that come from pharmaceuticals, everything that goes down the drain, the toilet, the car wash, etc. So we've developed a process to decontaminate those materials and actually totally convert biosolids to something else, to carbon fertilizer. Our end product, to be clear, is not biosolid. It is no longer biosolids. It's completely different. It's been entirely altered, decontaminated, and the remaining material is 30 to 32% carbon, and the balance of the material is macro and micronutrients that are free of those contaminants that are human health and environmental concerns.
So, if I understand that correctly, what I hear you saying is that you're taking the biosolids and pulling all the bad stuff out, leaving the good stuff behind. I mean, I live on a small farm. We have animals. We use the animal waste, to help grow food because it's full of nutrients that the ground likes and the plants like. So, are you basically creating a waste product, so to speak, that becomes something that can be used? Right? Is that the end goal? Is that you're pulling all the bad stuff out, you're leaving the good stuff behind?
That's a great, simple way to put it. We're pulling the bad stuff out, saving the good stuff. The good stuff that comes out it's dry, it's very stable, it has all kinds of benefits to the environment. It sequesters a tremendous amount of fixed carbon back into our agricultural soils. I could go on, but just very briefly, especially in the realm of industrial grade agriculture and crop production in North America and throughout the developed world, we've been pulling carbon and nutrients out of our fertile soils to grow crops for human consumption directly, for animal consumption. And for the most part, particularly with human consumption, the waste material that comes from the human population does not go back to the agricultural fields where it came from. Mm-hmm. It goes into little holes in the ground called landfills, or it goes to incinerators and gets burned directly. The solids get burned and pushed up into the atmosphere with some levels of air cleaning. And then there are other avenues too. So one of the things we just talked about was direct agricultural land application of biosolids. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the outlets for that material today. We do something completely different with it. We do exactly what you said. We take the bad stuff out treat those materials, dry them, create a very stable carbon fertilizer product that's loaded with macro and micronutrients, and use that safely as a fertilizer. And so that takes that material and puts it into a format that's a tremendous beneficial use for society.
So if we're taking the bad stuff out and we're leaving the good stuff behind, right, to be used, where does the bad stuff go?
Well, the volatile organic compounds and organofluorines like PFAS simply get broken apart, literally broken apart through a thermal process. So we have a multi-stage treatment system, and I'll describe that really briefly. The biosolids come in, they're mixed with clean waste wood. We mix in a little wood. It allows us to buffer moisture content. It also adds a little energy into the mix and a little additional carbon. So we will add about 10% wood waste into the biosolids. That gets mixed to provide a feedstock that is a continuous feed and has continuity. In other words, it's uniform.
Okay.
And that goes first into a dryer. And that dryer is simply a large rotary drum, which gets a lot of hot air pushed through it and heat under it. And that simply takes the moisture out of the mixed biosolids in wood. So when the biosolids come in, the moisture content's around 75%. And when they come out the other end of that dryer with the mixed wood, it's going to be down to about 5% moisture content. So at that point, it's quite dry. And from there, it goes into a pyrolysis kiln, which is basically another big rotary drum device with a lot of heat. So it's much hotter than the dryer. And in that pyrolysis kiln, that's where we're actually separating the unwanted volatile organic compounds and organofluorines like PFAS out of the solids. So there we're separating solids from gases, and the gases contain the unwanted contaminants, right? And so those gases also contain what I call an aerosolized oil. There is an oil mixed in with the gases, but it's aerosolized. Mm-hmm. And so that mixed gas and aerosolized oil gets pushed immediately into a thermal oxidizer, which again heats it to even higher temperature. So in the pyrolysis kiln, we're operating just over 1,000 degrees, and then those gases are pushed up into a thermal oxidizer, which the first stage of which operates at 2,300 degrees, which is higher than we had originally intended. And we can talk about the manufacturing reasons for that, but we've been able to secure a guarantee from the thermal oxidizer manufacturer to remove PFAS if we operate the first stage at 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's what we're going to do.
Let me ask this. So the first stage, right? So the whole process, from what I hear you saying, is first you dry it, mm-hmm. which means that there's water coming out of it, I would assume,
correct.
Right?
Yep.
Where does the water go?
Out the stack.
Out the stack. So
mm-hmm.
it's...
Yeah, the emissions from the plant will contain quite a lot of just H2O. As a matter of fact, if you were driving by and were to see our emission stack, if you saw a plume, especially in cold weather, a white plume coming out of there, mm-hmm. that is mostly water.
Okay. And is there any of the bad stuff in the water, I guess?
No, because that's in the dryer. You're separating it. You're actually no. The water is still at that point. The water is separated from the solids, and the solids contain all of the contaminants. Okay. Still at that point.
Okay, so first you dry it. The wastewater goes out the stack. I'd imagine it becomes rain at some or whatever, wherever water goes. So, and then your next part is that you heat it, but you're not burning it at this point. Is that the pyrolysis? Again, I have a very rudimentary understanding of it.
Correct. The pyrolysis kiln is a device that takes material in to an environment where we can heat it, as I said, to just over 1,000 degrees. In that environment, it has no oxygen. It's an oxygen-starved environment. So
so it can't burn.
Therefore, it can't burn. Without oxygen, there's no fire. And so that heating allows us to separate the volatile organic compounds, PFAS, and those sorts of things from the solids. So what comes out of the pyrolysis kiln is the end product. At that point, that carbon fertilizer it's hot. It needs to be cooled and bagged, but it's basically ready to go. It's done. The product is made at that point. It's what happens after that to the gases and the gas and volatilized oils that matters relative to decontamination. So from there, it goes, again, as I was saying, to the thermal oxidizer, which cooks it initially at 2,300 degrees. That's a 3-stage thermal oxidizer, so it goes through multiple stages, and that combustion breaks apart all those compounds. So there's really nothing left after that point of concern in the exhaust gas. And we capture the energy from that heat release, and we actually use that to heat the dryer. So that's what makes our process so efficient. We take the energy from the biosolids and mixed woods effectively in that manner, and we use that heat energy to run the dryer, so we don't have to use an outside fuel source to run the dryer.
So, okay. So you dry it, you heat it, very hot, but don't burn it per se, because there's no oxygen. And then you have your fertilizer, but there's still some of the bad stuff. The bad stuff goes up, and you heat it again. This time, though, you are burning it.
This time we're combusting the gases and the aerosolized oils. That's correct.
Okay. I think you said 2,300 degrees.
Initially 2,300. There, it's a multi-stage. The hottest point in it is the first stage at 2,300.
Okay. And that breaks up all of the bad stuff that we don't want.
Basically, yep.
Okay. And then it goes out the stack. So, the air that's there goes out the stack. But before it does...
Let's be careful with the use of the terms that goes out the stack from there. Because probably... relative to human health concerns and questions that have been raised about the air emissions from this facility, regardless of how successful we are at destroying contaminants in the thermal oxidizer process, what matters most is how we scrub the air and how effective the air treatment system is after that.
Okay. All right. So
because Mike, what if we don't get it all? I'm getting a manufacturer guarantee that says, oh yeah, at 2,300 degrees, we'll break up all the PFAS. There won't be any. Well, what if there is? I don't want it going out of our stack.
Right.
So the DEC is regulating us. There will be a permit compliance requirement that only certain amounts of certain compounds are allowed to go out of the stack. And we have to, if we don't comply with that permit, they shut us down.
Yeah.
And, we can't afford to be shut down. So we're not having that happen. So the air treatment system is critical in this whole process.
I have to imagine that in today's day and age, after all the things that have happened around the country over the last 100 years of major manufacturers polluting the environment and doing some pretty bad things, I guess, that there's got to be some oversight that is making sure that doesn't happen.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. I would characterize it this way. Yes, that has occurred. 100 years ago, there was no DEC here in New York. There was no environmental regulation.
Yeah, no EPA.
No EPA. And over that period of time, those organizations have grown. The regulations that they've developed, which are founded by the laws that are developed in our legislatures, have really continuously tightened the reins on environmental pollution concerns and human health concerns, and all for good reason. That's it. That absolutely is how it should be. And interestingly, here in New York State, we probably have the most aggressive or the most effective environmental regulator in the country. The only other one that remotely compares would be California.
Yeah, well, New York and California, we like to regulate everything.
Well, and some people say it's to a fault, but as it relates to human health, I don't know that there can ever be enough because horrible things have happened. So there is that oversight that you just mentioned. There is absolutely that type of oversight here in New York State.
Well, and that was something that I keep reading as well in both news articles and on Facebook and in different forums is that one of the concerns is that locally, we have had some, and I won't name them, but we've had some organizations that have not been kind to the environment. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there have been high cancer rates that I don't know if they've ever been able to exactly connect those dots, but I know that a lot of people locally feel that some of these higher cancer rates locally have been attributed to those organizations. And because of that, people are, to say, and rightfully so, a little bit gun shy. And so I guess my question is, how do you, I know that you mentioned manufacturer guarantee. Like, how do you not become one of those organizations? And I know that we kind of touched on it, but I know that it's kind of a big concern. And I want to make sure that I get the answer, right? Like, how do you not become those organizations?
Well, that's something that absolutely must be avoided because that sort of pollution and lack of care for environment and human health isn't acceptable anymore. So we wouldn't be able to operate. And again, back to the permit compliance. If we're not able to conform and comply with the permits that will be hopefully provided by New York State DEC for waste management, handling and for air emissions, we will be shut down. We'll be out of business, and that's not acceptable. So everything relates to the engineering, design, planning, testing, lab analysis, and we've spent years on this. So I've had a lot of criticism. You guys don't know that you can do this. Well, yeah, actually, we do know. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with our manufacturing partners, with field testing, and with lab analysis. And then I've had some people say, well, hand us the lab analysis. Well, no, I'm not handing over. This is trade secret information. If the regulator wants it, we've given the regulator everything that they need. And we would open up anything to them. Some of that would have to be redacted relative to public consumption because it's trade secret. It has tremendous intellectual property value that we have spent a lot of money and time on. And I'm not going to have our competitors just handed that information. So we've been doing this for years. And so it's all about the depth of the review and the planning and design and the team that encompasses all this. So we've got, this isn't me or my two founding partners, Lee Wolfecool and Bryce Meeker, doing all this. We're providing guidance to make sure that our consulting and manufacturing partners understand the business that we're trying to build and what it needs to do. But we're relying on people with chemical engineering degrees, physical engineering degrees, professional engineers, manufacturing design engineers with decades and decades of experience in thermal processing and chemical conversion to come up with the answers to meet the needs of our business plan.
And now you mentioned in the conversation earlier about like manufacturer guarantees. Like what does that mean exactly when you have a manufacturer? I mean, because again, there's been questions that, this has never been done before. You're the first facility of your kind. I don't know if it's in the world, but in this country anyway. What does a guarantee mean? Like from the manufacturers, I don't understand that.
So I can describe that really, really clearly and succinctly. But first, we're not the first facility of this kind in the world. Biosolids, biochar production is occurring in Europe and in the UK and China, and the North American continent hasn't adapted yet. So, but we're definitely ahead of the curve in that regard, and that's we want to and we need to be first to market with that. That's our first mover advantage, and so that has a lot of value to us. But the guarantees really come in three different levels or three areas. The first is simply a process guarantee from the thermal processing equipment manufacturer, and that basically says that this equipment is guaranteed to process 10 tons per hour of the material that you want to process without fail. And if there is failure, the manufacturer has a certain set of responsibilities, financial and direct and immediate intervention responsibilities to fix that problem. And to us, that means business continuity. And it also means that we wouldn't have to, have a stream of biosolids backed up at the facility and unable to be processed. And we're working with a manufacturer that's been building thermal processing equipment for 148 years here in the United States. This is a U.S. manufacturer.
And when I don't mean to interrupt, but when you say a stream of biosolids backed up at the facility, do you mean like from a transport standpoint, or like you won't have a line of I know that's
yeah. So from a transport standpoint, so we have two mechanisms, right? So first off, we need to be able to process a material that comes in without fail. So that's what the manufacturing guarantee provides for us relative to process guarantee. And we also have an engagement with our feedstock provider, Casella Organics, which contractually enables us to, with a phone call, say, if we needed to, you have to stop bringing biosolids immediately. And so at that point, they would divert the trucks before they ever got to Moreau. They'll go somewhere else. They'll go to a landfill, another incinerator, land out, all the things that we don't want them to do with biosolids. They'll go back to doing what they do today, which would cost us a lot of money because we're unable at that point to meet the contractual obligations with the feedstock provider. So therefore, we get basically the manufacturer guarantee covers the cost of that downtime effectively. So that's level one, is just process guarantee on the thermal processing equipment. The second level, which is really important, is the guarantee from the manufacturer that's building the thermal oxidation unit, the multi-stage thermal oxidizer that we talked about a minute ago.
And that's where you cook the bad stuff to break it apart?
Nope.
All right.
No, that's pyrolysis. The thermal oxidation is the next stage after that, where we actually heat the gas and aerosolized oil to 2,300 degrees, and then it steps down in a multi-stage combustion chamber.
Okay, so that's the one that basically breaks up the PFAS.
Yeah, that's combustion.
Okay.
And so in order to obtain a guarantee from that manufacturer, we've raised the temperature. We've made it a multi-stage unit. The cost of it's gone from $1 million to $3 million to have that surety that it will do what it's prescribed to do. And so that's really important because that manufacturer is literally giving us a guarantee on PFAS destruction, which has become a really hot topic. A lot of people are concerned about it. I guess rightly so. And additionally, we know that the EPA, the US EPA, is tightening regulations on PFAS. They have named there are over 4,000 variants of PFAS in the manufacturing world that are used in all kinds of different products and things, including things that you eat with. But the regulations are being tightened on those as a set generally, and certain components of that set of PFAS compounds have now been deemed hazardous material. That's not biosolids, but specifically certain variants of PFAS are now regulated as hazardous. And so my point is that we know that as time goes on, the requirements for PFAS remediation and the requirements that there is no PFAS or that PFAS is heavily regulated in air emissions are going to get tighter and tighter. So we don't want to have to rebuild the plant 10 years from now. We're building it today to be ready for today's regulations and tomorrow's, especially relative to PFAS, because it's a trace amount in biosolids, but it does exist. It's of high public concern, and we have made the commitment that we remediate PFAS from the material, and we're committed to that to do that. So that's thermal oxidation guarantee for PFAS destruction. And the third level of manufacturer guarantee is the air treatment system. We are working with Condor Chem and Virotech. It's a massive European company, one of, if not the most successful industrial air treatment manufacturer providers in the world. And that air treatment system is in excess of $2 million. And we are getting a guarantee from that manufacturer that we will meet or exceed the requirements for our New York State DEC air emissions permit, and that we will exceed expectations for odor removal. It's one of the most important things to us is not to have a facility that stinks up the neighborhood. And, Moreau is a fairly rural area. Within a half a mile of facility, there are, I think, under 60 residences or residential locations or postal addresses anyway. And, but we don't want an odor problem. We don't want odor complaints.
Right.
We don't want to be a bad neighbor. We've created and signed a policy in Moreau that says we'll be a good neighbor. We won't stink it up. We won't have problems with trucks. We won't have noise that exceeds the town's noise regulations and things like that. So it's important to us to remediate odor. And so what comes out the emission stack of the facility goes relatively unnoticed by the surrounding public.
So I guess on that point, and I know, like you said, you're going above and beyond expectations from the DEC as far as what your emissions are. I guess, I don't know what those standards are. I have to assume they're probably pretty high, but I know that one of the things that we've seen in the news is that you've been, hit with a lawsuit, I guess, from a local environmental about your air emissions. So I guess that's what I'm another one of the things I'm confused about. If you're above and beyond what all of the regulating agencies are asking, what possibly could someone be suing you for? I guess, again, one of the things that is just very confusing out there.
Yeah, there's just based on your question there's a lot of confusion. So first off, the lawsuit is called an Article 78 complaint, and it was filed against the Town of Moreau Planning Board specifically. Oh, okay. And Saratoga Biochar was named as a co-respondent. And what that lawsuit alleges is that the Town of Moreau Planning Board did not adequately adhere to New York State's Environmental Quality Review Act and the requirements of that act for project reviews. They basically say that the town didn't do enough review of the proposed project and that they did not rightfully issue a State Environmental Quality Review negative declaration. Negative meaning no substantial environmental impact. they issued a negative declaration that said there would be no substantial environmental impact, meaning that it's like mild to moderate. And in the process of their review, they also discussed and evaluated the environmental and human health mitigation measures that we have proposed and designed, and that covered a lot of areas from wastewater discharge, the wastewater content, air emissions, truck traffic, traffic route, odor, noise, environmental concerns like, are we building on a property that potentially has endangered species or anything of that nature? Archaeological remains, all of those things were covered in that review. All of those things, including also things like emergency management. We met with the Saratoga County Emergency Management and with the local fire department chief to review the facility layout, and we got their input, and we'll continue to get their input through the building permit process to ensure that the facility is properly designed for emergency response and emergency management and things like that. So the review was comprehensive. The lawsuit alleges that it wasn't, but that's what it's about. It's about the state environmental quality review specifically. It's not detailed to the level of, it's not a lawsuit against an air emissions profile or something.
Gotcha.
Like that.
Okay. Because that's, again, as you read all these different things, whether it's on Facebook or in some of the news articles that I've read, that was the impression that I got, was that you guys were being sued, but it's...
Yeah. Well, in effect, we are, but the lawsuit is directly aimed at the Town and Rural Planning Board, and we're the applicant relative to the approval that they provided, so they named us as a co-respondent.
Okay.
And an Article 78 lawsuit, it's not like a civil lawsuit. There's no discovery. There's no trial. What it is it's a complaint filed where an appointed judge will then review the record of the government's handling of an action. So in other words, the Saratoga County Court is going to review the Monroe Town Planning Board's handling of our application and the handling of their state environmental quality review relative to our application, and the court will then render a decision that the way that agency handled that was appropriate or not.
Understood. Okay. That makes a little more sense. What I just a couple more questions. I know we're kind of getting pressed for time. One of the things that I keep seeing a lot too is the term, and we kind of touched on this in the beginning with the whole Maine deal, but like I keep hearing sewage sludge. Are you bringing sewage sludge into the area?
We're bringing biosolids into the area. So there's a lot of confusion around that, and those terms are used interchangeably.
Like it sounds like you're going to have 100 trucks a day coming in with this sewage sludge. Mm-hmm. That's what I keep reading, and I just from a little information that I know about the process, that doesn't seem to be the case. But again, there's so much information out there, so I'm just.
So a lot of people, even people within the wastewater treatment industry, refer to sludge and biosolids interchangeably, but reality is sewage sludge is the solids within a waste that are received at a wastewater treatment plant that come in with the water, and so it's a liquid. Sewage sludge is a liquid. You could had a bucket full of it,
right, sloshing around,
and pour it out on the ground. It has not yet been treated. Biosolids are treated sewage sludge, so it's multiple stages after the receipt of wastewater from the sewage treatment plant. It gets dewatered, sludge settles out. The sludge settles out of the water for the dewatering process. They, in most cases, add the bacteria to it that consumes organic matter and literally transforms sewage sludge into something else, which is called biosolids after it's done. So there's an additional treatment process. I'm not suggesting that biosolids are clean. They're not. And in our opinion, they need much further treatment. That's why we're doing what we do, right, to take that material, which has a lot of valuable carbon and nutrients in it, and clean it so that it can be safely and properly used as an agricultural soil amendment or fertilizer. So that's really the difference. Biosolids are the quote-unquote treated material that comes out of a sewage treatment plant, and it's not sewage sludge, and it's not liquid. It's a solid.
So there is a difference between the two things. And
yes.
Okay.
That's the difference.
And you're not bringing sewage sludge.
We're not bringing sewage sludge. Another thing we've been accused of is we'll be burning sludge. We don't. Our process does not burn any solids. We don't burn sewage sludge. To be clear, we do not burn sewage sludge. The incinerator up the road or wherever else in New York State where the incinerators exist that do receive trash and municipal waste, which often includes biosolids, they are burning it.
Well, so that was one of my other questions was, and because something you said earlier kind of said that, like, let's just pretend there's no Saratoga Biochar. What happens to those biosolids now? What happens to that sewage sludge now? Where does it go?
I'll tell you exactly where it goes, and I'll be as quick as I can because I know we're pressed for time. But just to back up a step, we're not an incinerator. There are incinerators out there that do burn biosolids. They burn the solids, and all that material, including only partially remediated PFAS, goes up into the air. It's not all caught in the air scrubbers, not by a long shot.
Doesn't Glens Falls have an incinerator?
Yes. Yeah, right up the road.
Yeah, right. Like,
wouldn't it be nice if some of the material gets diverted from that incinerator to our facility where it can be properly handled, where we're not burning it and putting it up in the atmosphere?
So that's what that was something that I was thinking about too. I'm like, I don't understand. So Glens Falls wastewater treatment plant, which is located on Shermantown Road in Glens Falls, and I just happen to know that because I used to have a business on Shermantown. It's a long story, but right off of Warren Street, they burn it there.
I'd have to be careful. I don't know what that Warren Street facility's permit includes. I really don't know if they actually are permitted to take and incinerate biosolids. But if they do, that wouldn't happen anymore after our facility is built. But we do know of other incinerators in the state that are permitted to receive and incinerate biosolids along with municipal waste trash.
Okay.
Which is, in our opinion, a horrible practice. But back to your question about where do biosolids go currently in the state of New York. Well, first of all, interestingly, 25% of the biosolids generated in the state get trucked or train hauled out of the state because we're running out of landfill space. We don't have anywhere to put it. And we're not permitting new landfills. It's extremely difficult in New York State at this point in time to develop a new landfill. So it begs the question, how long are other states going to want to take our what? So we have endless examples of where it's been hauled by train at a tremendous transportation cost. Bear in mind, biosolids is, even though it's a solid, is still 75% water content. So we're hauling water around all over the country, as far as Colorado, Texas, Tennessee, I think currently. By train. It's very, very expensive. It's a foolish way to handle this material. And it's only because we don't have a system here in New York to handle it properly. So 25% gets hauled out of state, landfills accepted, incinerators accepted. That comes to an end pretty quickly because it just stinks and nobody wants it, and rightly so. Secondly, how is it handled here in the state? About 65% gets landfilled. Most landfills are designed to attend to water drainage within the landfill and not have leachate end up in the groundwater, but there's no guarantee. So, biosolids, leachates could be, making their way out of the landfill on surface water or through groundwater. It must happen. I'm sure it happens. So there's that. It's a tremendous nuisance odor. It's usually used on the top of the trash pile because it makes a good covering for it. It gets mixed with soil to cover an area a landfill cell that's been filled with municipal waste, and so therefore it's right on top, and so it rots and it stinks. And if you smell a landfill from 2 miles away, it's probably not the trash. It's probably the biosolids that you're smelling, rotting biosolids. And so most goes to landfills. A good chunk goes to incineration, where the solids are directly burned, and that's a tremendous waste of a valuable material, carbon and nutrients, and puts a lot of carbon dioxide equivalents, and other contaminants up into our atmosphere. And then additionally, quite a fair amount of it, I think around 16% in New York State, gets put towards what's called an alternative or quote unquote beneficial use. It's composted and directly land applied as a fertilizer. And that's probably one of the things that our company ethos is most averse to, because that takes that material, which does have trace amounts of contaminants, and frequently puts it right back into the human food chain, which in my opinion is stupid.
And that's like what happened in Maine. That is
exactly what happened in Maine. And we are diametrically opposed to that. We do the exact opposite of that. We decontaminate that material, make it into a clean fertilizer, lab analyzed, guaranteed analyzed, certified clean for use as a fertilizer. And matter of fact, so clean that it will take some time and probably a couple of years of consistent lab testing of our product, but it is our goal in the end to get a USDA organic certification for that material. We may never get it. But we're going to come darn close, and we're going to try. It is that clean.
So I know we're over our time, but one last quick question, because I literally just saw this comment on Facebook this morning, was that someone had said something about like you wouldn't put it on your own garden or something like that. Would you put your product on your own garden?
I would absolutely put my product, our biochar, our carbon fertilizer, on my own garden for food production for myself and my family. That Facebook post may have been referring to using biosolids, untreated biosolids, as a fertilizer, which again, I totally agree. That's crazy. It should not be used for human food production. It should also not be used for growing plant matter that's consumed by animals that we then eat, because some of those contaminants in biosolids can bioaccumulate and make their way up through the food chain and end up on our plate.
That's crazy.
Yes, it is. We can do better.
I agree. Ray, thanks again for coming on today and kind of helping to, I mean, I feel a little less confused, that's for sure. And, one more time, I think if anybody has questions, can you give us the information on the Monday session one more time?
Yeah, so there is a public participation virtual meeting being held on Monday evening at 6 p.m., Monday, December 19th. Information to access that meeting can be found on our website. That's saratogabiochar.com/PPP, which is short for Public Participation Plan. Again, saratogabiochar.com/PPP. There you'll find information on how to access the meeting, as well as all of the links relative to our environmental permit applications.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And, if you're listening and you have someone or know someone that is also as confused as I was, maybe send this podcast over to them, send them the link. You'll be able to find it on both Saratoga Business Report, Glens Falls Today, and Saratoga Today newspaper.com. Thanks.
One other, sorry, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
One other real quick thing for listeners that are interested in direct interaction. You can use our company email address. It's called info, INFO, at saratogabiochar.com.
That's awesome. I know that you have been pretty right. I remember I was sitting in a planning board meeting and you'd actually given one of the local residents your cell phone. Told them to call you or text you if there's any issues.
Absolutely.
So, appreciate that, Ray. Thanks again. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.